Hello, and thanks for joining my session on the cloud, security threat or opportunity. Spoiler alert, as you'll find out in this session, it's actually both. So my name is Jon Rohrich. I'm a security and compliance specialist at Microsoft Canada. And we're seeing, an unprecedented economic uncertainty and shift in the world nowadays. So a lot of organizations have constrained the resources as they navigate all the new business challenges. And virtually overnight, companies have seen the need to accelerate their digital transformation. So this is going to ensure that their users and workers are able to remain productive and be able to respond to their customers' expectations. And technology and business models overall have been evolving, and the way people work has changed. So, we no longer expect to access, the myriad of corporate resources and applications that we need to solely from the office or from company-owned devices. Nowadays we're seeing folks that are doing their work on personal devices, mobile phones, laptops, tablets, etc. Um, and as a result of this, security teams, they're really kind of stretched thin in terms of being able to keep up with all these changes, and certainly, maybe because of that, the costs of data breaches and regulatory, mishaps are definitely increasing. The first thing I'm going to talk about is threats in the cloud. So as companies are moving to this new way of working and moving to the cloud, what type of threats do they see? So along with all the opportunity and increased productivity that the cloud, brings, it's also going to bring a multitude of threats, from data breaches to malicious insiders. There's a lot of different stuff out there to be concerned about. We're also seeing that as companies are moving to the cloud, the responsibility for security really shifts to this sort of shared model that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I'm going to expand on that. And then finally, we're seeing an evolution in the attack kill chain. So attacks are being orchestrated in the cloud. Bad guys are using, these capabilities that are supposed to work for us. They're kind of using those against us. So, once an attacker has compromised an environment, they try and figure out how they can stay there and escalate privileges by moving laterally across the organization. And some examples of the attacks that we see in cloud environments could be things like password spray attacks, malicious code being executed from the cloud. Um, Microsoft being a mail provider, we're seeing a lot of times attackers will set up exchange forwarding rules to exfiltrate data out of the organization. Internal phishing, so once they phish one person, they're able to compromise credentials. They'll try and use that account to, maybe move up higher and get a manager's credentials or something like that to be able to hopefully aim for privilege escalation. Exchange OneDrive exfiltration. So, as folks are using cloud applications, and by the way, I want to state that, while I work for Microsoft, I'm really talking about this as a overall cloud lens. So whether you're on Microsoft or Google or whichever cloud provider you're using, a lot of these concepts are going to remain the same. But what we're seeing is that a lot of folks are using these storage mediums and things like Exchange Online and OneDrive to try and exfiltrate data outside of the organization. Exchange reconnaissance, so searching the Exchange organization, and even attacking the supply chain. So trying to get malicious code onto machines before they're even shipped to the customer. And then finally, malicious OAuth apps. So applications that are going to take certain permissions that a user is going to grant and then abuse those rights. And so, how does the security challenge change? So, a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations now are leveraging these cloud service providers, and really the way that we secure our environments has changed a lot since the days of yore. So, if you look at sort of what the environment looks like now, we have it's a lot more difficult to defend against these cyber attacks. So how do we think about our assets? What must we defend against? And this is extremely different from 5 or 10 years ago. So IT organizations are now finding themselves responsible for protecting a or crisscrossing web of technology that they may not own. These can include things like user-owned mobile devices that are used to access corporate data, systems and devices used by your partners and customers to access your information. And there's over 7 billion internet connected devices in the world. And that's not even including laptops and mobile devices. So you have multiple points of vulnerability for your overall estate. And this complexity is really creating additional compliance challenges as well. It's critical that you understand what you have, what's sensitive, what needs to be kept, and for how long. And that's in addition to securing everything across your heterogeneous environments. These advances all change the game when it comes to security. You no longer have the luxury of, drawing a perimeter around your organization and assuming that everything within that is going to be kept safe. And so, taken together, all of the trends that we've outlined, they're representing a shared challenge to IT security. Um, and according to Forrester, they're saying that the future of cybersecurity is in the cloud. And you see this actually from a lot of these analysts and a lot of these organizations that are talking about cloud security and or even security trends. So you look at something like Gartner, who's recently popularized the term SASE, the Secure Access Service Edge. And really what they're saying is that the days of going and saying, okay, well, what are the best things in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and, putting those and bolting them onto your environment and calling it a day. Um, that's that's not as effective as we thought it was, right? So being able to have sort of an integrated, solution that's built in the cloud. Is really the way that security is going, and this is unlocking a whole new generation of security. So things like zero trust, um, where you're basically treating every access attempt as if it's coming from an unsecured network. Um, so this is a world where people are your new perimeter, where the identity is really the front door, and that's where we want to protect, and your data is hosted in the cloud. And so you need to remove the implicit assumption that to verification. So this means that we verify the user's location, we verify the role that they play in the organization, the health of their device, the network they're coming from, the classification of the data. And we do all that before we even allow them to access, our data or services. So if we look at doing risk assessments, now that we've moved to the cloud, there's a lot of big differences. There's a lot of new opportunities for security. I don't know how many times that I've had discussions with security teams at some of our large enterprise customers, where I've gotten scoffed at when I've implied that moving to the cloud is going to provide a higher degree of security than your own data center. Um, I think there's a lot less scoffing at that now. There's a lot of people are starting to realize that cloud solution providers are often in a better position in to be able to provide this type of security. But we're seeing things like the shared responsibility model. This is a huge piece of the security puzzle when we're moving to the cloud. Um, you know, uh, Cloud providers need to be transparent about your data and how they're using it and where they're storing it. Some instances we may need to have a very specific requirements about where we're storing data, what local regulations we have to adhere to, and we always have to respect the privacy of users and customers and the data that they trust us with, whether as cloud solutions providers. Um, but as I said, the opportunity for better security, that is certainly there. So being able to protect data, being able to have not only cloud-based but cloud-powered security tools is really going to change the game in the way that we approach security with data in the cloud. So one important thing to note here is that cloud security is a partnership. So regardless of whether the cloud solutions provider is going to be Microsoft or Google or Amazon, AWS, regardless of who that is, cloud services are built on a foundation of trust and security. You need to be able to trust your cloud solutions provider. You need to be able to work with them, and they need to provide you the controls and capabilities to protect your data and applications. And then, of course, on your end of things, you have to own the data and the identities and be responsible for protecting them. So, working with customers who have had data breaches and said, how did this happen? We put our data in the cloud, supposed to be secure. You know, you sold us this technology, and now we're wondering why we're breached. And it's, well, you wonder why admin accounts are not being protected with multi-factor authentication. Insecure. You hear all the time about data breaches of insecure storage in the cloud, things like S3 buckets without any kind of security around them. So there is a certain degree of configuration on the enterprise side, on the organization side, of control that you have to put in place in order to protect your resources. And so if we look at security in a cloud-enabled world, we get this shared responsibility model. And I'm sure you've heard of this before. your organization's responsibility for security is really based on the type of cloud service that you select. So whether, if you're all on-prem, then naturally it's all going to be, the organization's responsibility to secure everything from, the physical data center to identity and access management to data governance and rights management. As we start to shift to infrastructure as a service or platform as a service and software as a service, and we get new capabilities, we're also offloading some of that responsibility to our cloud providers. So no longer do we have to worry about the physical data center. We don't have to worry about protecting the network or the host. You may have to worry about things like patching the operating system if you're, in an IaaS scenario. But more often than not, as you're moving to these services, the cloud solutions provider is going to take care of this. That doesn't mean you're completely off the hook. Things like accounts and access management, securing identities, securing your client endpoints, and data governance and right management are always going to remain something that the organization needs to protect. And so this brings us to the question, can cloud solution providers really do better at security than your own organization? And so that, again, to give an example, I work for Microsoft, so obviously I'm going to talk about this from a Microsoft lens, but this really, it can often be thought of the same, regardless of whether we're talking about Microsoft or AWS or GCP or whatever cloud platform you're leveraging, is that these are massive companies. And so if you look at Microsoft, for example, we spend over $1 billion a year on security research and development every single year. That's just on security, nothing else. And that's pretty huge. So when we provide cloud services, we're providing a commitment to our customers that there's going to be security, there's going to be privacy and control. We're going to remain compliant with regulatory standards. We're going to be transparent about the way we handle your data, and we're going to provide a reliability service, right? So you're going to have a reliable service that you have a service level agreement for, and you're going to expect that service to be available. And so the way this translates is, cloud service solutions provider, they should be keeping your data secure. Your data should be private. It should be under your control. You should expect that your data is going to be managed in accordance with whatever laws are in your region. And probably one of the most important ones is you should know what the cloud solution provider is doing with your data. How are they using it? Who has access to it? And of course, having enterprise grade uptime for these cloud services is also very important. So if we look at Microsoft and we look at the way that we provide security for our cloud services, this is pretty broad, and it's a multi-layered sort of defense in depth way of approaching things. Everything from physical security of the data center, perimeters and fences and bollards and things like that are protecting your data center. Strong authentication, having a geographic redundancy. You can expect us to take a very, very good approach to isolating networks and protecting domains and partitioning those and keeping your data separate from other customers. Your content on storage is going to be encrypted. We have to have disaster recovery capabilities, and in many cases it's going to be a geo redundancy. Application, when we're developing applications that you're using to get your work done and to do your business, we follow a secure development lifecycle. We have the Microsoft Security Research Center. We have bug bounty programs to, allow researchers to try and find vulnerabilities in our software, and then we're going to pay them a bunch of money to disclose those to us so we can get them patched. In access, we're talking about access. So even Microsoft, as much as we give our customers the ability to provide multi-factor authentication, we also do that internally at Microsoft, just-in-time access and customer locks. So this is really about, if you ever do need support from your cloud solution provider, they shouldn't have standing access to your data, right? So if they ever need to do some work in your cloud instance, you should expect that that's going to be just-in-time access to whatever data they need. It should go through some form of approval process, and in some cases, that's going to be an approval process that you as the organization is going to have a say and control over. Looking at the the operational security of our data centers, right? So you can expect a high degree of physical security with 24-hour monitoring and multi-factor authentication. There's going to be administrative background checks. As I mentioned, zero standing access to data. Your data is always going to want to be encrypted. And it's important to run testing too, right? So red team, blue team exercises, penetration testing, adherence to regulatory standards is often going to include those types of exercises, but it's important to have them included in the protection of your data. Product development is going to be using that security development lifecycle, and as I mentioned, the bug bounty programs, which are hugely important. Um, and so Microsoft data centers are pretty interesting. So just to get access, even to the building or the structure, in my role at Microsoft, I don't even know the actual location of my local data center. I know the city. I know that being in Canada, we have data centers in Toronto and Quebec City. But if you ask me to point them on a map, I'm probably going to point to the wrong object because I don't actually know the location of those. And so if I do, for whatever reason, need to travel to a data center, not only do I have to have a background check just to work for Microsoft, but I would have another background check to be able to have access to said data center. We do system checks and things like that if I needed to bring any kind of system into that building. Um, the physical perimeter of that building is going to have, things like fences, bollards, front entrance gates, a single defined access points. Naturally, we're going to have CCTV video coverage. There's likely going to be ongoing roaming security patrols. And then once you get into the building, there's also additional authentication that's needed. So I would have to provide two-factor authentication. There'd be biometrics. There's not going to be any kind of building signage. You won't see something that says Microsoft Data Center. Naturally within that building, there's going to be ongoing roaming patrols, CCTV video coverage, and we're going to verify, single person entry through things like man traps and turnstiles. So, and of course, we have 24/7 security operations. Most people can't even, if you do get into a Microsoft data center, that chances are that's as far as you're going to be able to get is just within the building. If we're talking about the folks that actually need to have physical access to the server environment, you can see that the level of protection and level of security there is even stronger, right? So we very closely vet employees and contractors that need to go there. You're not able to identify locations of customer data. If we need to dispose of hardware and things like that, we're shredding hard drives and things like that. There's going to be ongoing security patrols and video coverage of the entire place. So, a lot of this is really to adhere to, not only to give our customers the assurance that they're going to have, that their data is going to be in a secure facility, but in many instances, it's to adhere to compliance regulations. And so if you look at a lot of these cloud solutions providers, your data center, you might have to adhere to something like Canada privacy laws, or maybe if you're in healthcare, you have the healthcare industry compliance certification that you'd have to adhere to. And if you look at the way Microsoft does business, we actually have all of these compliance certifications. So, if you want to find out, is there, an audit report for ISO 27001, that's available to you. You can download that. You can read through the audits that are happening on an annual basis for any of these compliance certifications that Microsoft receives. And likely the same thing is going to be the case for other cloud solutions providers as well. I'm sure Google and AWS and all the various cloud solution providers are going to have their own, compliance certifications and audits and reports that you can read on. And another big thing about the way that cloud solution providers provide security is they often have telemetry and signals that they can leverage, to be able to build their security services. And this is probably one of the biggest parts, at least from Microsoft's perspective, that differentiates us in the security space is, when we're creating security solutions, we're not just coding them and releasing them and customers buy them and use them. There's a lot more that goes in on the back end of this. So we're actually, building these solutions to leverage just trillions of signals of telemetry behind the scenes. So if you think about what Microsoft does on a daily basis, and you can also think what your cloud solution provider might do on a daily basis in terms of their other services. We're indexing web pages. We're scanning emails for malware. We're scanning Windows devices and updating Windows devices. We're dealing with billions of monthly authentication to consumer accounts and enterprise accounts. We have our own digital crimes unit that's actually shutting down botnets and stopping child exploitation online and things like that. Um, we're also partnered with a lot of different organizations, security organizations, as part of the Microsoft Intelligence Security Alliance, different researchers and law enforcement organizations across the globe. And we're sharing threat data across those organizations and building that into everything that we do. And if you think about, organizations that are leveraging our services, 90% of Fortune 500, you can imagine just the sheer wealth of data that an organization or cloud solutions provider like Microsoft is having to be able to analyze and build in that threat intelligence and signal into our security products. And so when you move to, for example, the Microsoft cloud, and again, I can't say for certain what some of the other cloud solutions providers are out there doing, but I would hazard to guess that a lot of them have similar types of solutions that are going to be able to secure your cloud environments on top of your basic controls of things like patching your operating systems and ensuring you have the correct rights assigned to the right people. So identity and access management is a huge one. If we look at the identity being sort of the control plane and the front door to accessing services and data, having things like single sign-on is hugely important. Being able to evaluate each authentication when it happens to achieve some level of zero trust. Providing multi-factor authentication for those access attempts and authentication attempts. And then looking at the device. And when we look at the device, we get into things like threat protection. So being able to have an endpoint detection and response platform where we're analyzing those threats and you can, providing forensics tools to see, what may have happened on various endpoints across your organization. Forensic tools. If we provide an email service, as Microsoft does, having capabilities to stop phishing and stop, malware or nefarious or malicious links or attachments from being able to be sent to your users. Having a cloud-based SIEM or source for your security, incident and event management and orchestration. Protecting you against denial of service attacks, application control. One of the big ones as we move to the cloud is cloud access security brokers. This is a huge market now that organizations as they're adopting these services. You want to make sure that we're providing some insight and discovery into what applications your users are using, what kind of data they're putting up there, and being able to sanction and unsanction certain applications that might be across the environment, stop people from accessing applications that could put your data at risk. And then finally, when we deal with the data, as we think about that, the shared responsibility model, providing you with the tools to be able to look at the data that you have, figure out, which type of data might be sensitive. Does it need to be classified and protected? We can apply a label to that says confidential? Are we going to apply policy to that prevents it from being, maybe uploaded to a consumer cloud service or printed from the device or shared to a USB or put in a cloud service that we haven't sanctioned, or being sent to a user who's maybe not authorized to view that information. So providing you with all the tools to label and protect and classify and encrypt all of that sensitive data is a huge piece of the security management platform that you're going to need to have access to. And then finally, defense in depth, right? So, being able to put security on the client endpoints, endpoint protection, antivirus, whatever you have there, that's going to be important. But we need to go further than that. And so when we have defense in depth, that's really the concept of applying security controls at multiple layers within the stack, right? So if our adversaries are trying to, access your data, and now that the way that infrastructure has changed, where we're using cloud services, we might not be signing in from a computer on the corporate network or inside the data center, or sorry, inside the corporate office, especially now. We need to look at defending multiple different layers. So, we have our servers that are going to, maybe manage our Active Directory, or what other services in the organization. We need to ensure that they're protected. We have to do, some level of privilege identity management. Maybe we're going to have a mobile device management tool on the server as well. Penetration testing and endpoint security are hugely important as well for server security. And then we get to the network level. So, having a proper firewall in place, having an email gateway that's going to check for, malicious emails that are coming in. Um, Naturally, having, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems are going to be important. Being able to analyze malware, being able to look at, hunt for, maybe we're going to hunt for, things like advanced persistent threats that are in the organizations, or potential, exploitation of zero-day attacks and things like that. So being able to have the capability to hunt for these types of vulnerabilities is also very important. And then finally, when we're dealing with that data, whether we're sending that data to the cloud or we're storing it on a server somewhere, we need to ensure that we have a level of data loss prevention in place. Access control is going to be important. We need to, ensure that there's encryption, and really that the only the users that are meant to access certain data are going to have access to that data. And then outside of that, it's important to test your defenses. So being able to do red team, blue team exercises, penetration testing, things like that. We need to ensure that if we're partnering with other organizations and we're collaborating with those organizations, can we ensure the level of security when they're authenticating? Do we have to provide MFA for our partners and things like that? Providing single sign-on for cloud applications, and again, analyzing each authentication request to ensure that it's coming from who it says it is. And then, one of the biggest things is multi-factor authentication. Are we going to provide that additional layer of authentication as users are trying to access any of these applications and services? And quite often, that's going to thwart a lot of attacks. We're seeing that most of the attacks, if you look at the Verizon data breach investigation report that comes out every year, you'll see that most of those attacks are really based on identity. So whether it's we're phishing for credentials and stealing them, or however credentials are being stolen, it all starts with credentials, right? So credentials that are either insecure or being compromised. And that's really how our adversaries are attacking most of the time. And so if we just do something simple like implement multi-factor authentication, we're going to thwart the good majority, 99.9% of those attacks. And so that's important. And so, in summary, I do want to say that, well, moving to the cloud, might seem scary. It might seem something like that's going to open up, to all kinds of different new threats, and pose a huge risk to your organization. More often than not, your cloud solution provider is going to provide you with the tools to be able to do security better, to be able to provide a higher degree of security than you ever may have been able to before. And so, as you're doing this digital transformation, you're moving to the cloud, and your users are coming and they're working remotely, and you're able to accomplish so much more outside of your normal office. It's important to make sure that your cloud solution provider is providing you a high degree of security, and that the tools available to you that are often cloud-based and cloud-powered are implemented effectively in order to provide that degree of security. So thank you very much for joining me today. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have other questions, and also feel free to swing by the Microsoft virtual booth, and we'll have experts there that can talk about things like identity and access management, and compliance, and other things. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of GoSec.